Alright, we're back here in the Drawcast, and I'm in the lab with your good friend and mine, Mike Manley, and he's in the middle of inking the newest Creepertins strip for Delaware County magazine, and we're chewing the fat, as they say in the old country.
Are we in the old country? I thought we were in the new world.
Well, it depends on who you ask, Mike. And Mike is inking the strip with a pen nib, and Mike told me during the break that he acquired this actual pen nib in China, and I asked Mike if there's a difference in tools depending on, where you get them from, or say, how people say the new stuff isn't as good as the old stuff. Do you find that to be true with things like pen nibs?
Definitely with pen nibs. I got this when I was in China, and one of the things that I noticed right away was that the steel was the actual metal that the nib was made out of was a higher gauge, and that means that it's a better piece of metal, that it flexes better and everything. And this is sort of similar to what would used to be like the Gillette pen points, and I still have a few of those too. So, but yeah, I love a good solid pen point. You can see here a good solid pen gives you really just a great line character. You can really it just sings. It's like, I'm sure what a musician feels like if they play a really good instrument. If you have a good tool, it just makes all the difference in the world.
So, with that said, so when you tell a young cartoonist, go to the A.J. Wright and pick up a speedball set, are you dealing with something that'll give you a professional line?
Well, yeah, any professional is going to be able to get a good line, right? You can use a crappy brush or a cheesy pen, and you can still get something good out of it if you have skill. The fact is the better the tool, the nicer the ride is. A crappy car will still get you to the store, but it's much nicer to ride in a Lexus, right?
Right.
We're really sort of talking about performance. If every time I go to make a line a certain way, the tool fights me, that's not good.
Right. And the same can be said for paper.
Right. And this paper is pretty good. It's right at basically for me, it's at the bottom. Okay. It tears just a little bit. If this paper had any less rag content, it would not be good especially for inking with a pen. You need a good tough paper to be able to ink with a pen.
So a lot of times when I'm talking to my students about cartooning, and I tell them that they need to go and get good paper or good board, they fight me a little bit because they don't really get the point of, different teeth on paper, or what a 2-ply versus a 3-ply Bristol is. What would you say to somebody who's still trying to figure out how the tools work for them? Do you need the professional grade 4-ply Strathmore board when you're first starting out?
I always believe you use good material. You always use a good tool whenever you can. You always use a good pen. You always buy good paper. I can understand, art supplies are expensive, but in the end, for me, what's important is being able to get, a good quality piece of work. And if the paper I'm using tears when I ink, or bleeds or whatever, well, that's not going to help me very much.
So, are you buying supplies in the need for archiving as well?
I guess that's always some were concerned, but most art supplies today are good enough that everything is pretty much acid free and stuff. I mean, unless you're buying really just crappy stuff, most stuff will be around.
One thing I get from students once in a while is the fact that they don't really understand what line weight is, especially in the terms of American cartooning, because a big part of manga is kind of like a dead line.
Yeah, but if you look at Tezuka and guys like that, they all have a very expressive line. So yeah, I mean, line weight, when you're inking, you see this pencil drawing has all kinds of different values. When you ink, it's either black or white. So you try to achieve depth or make things stand out. Like these characters have a bolder line around them than the background, so they stand out. That's something that just probably takes a little while for people to really get.
I used to subscribe to this old newsletter / zine on cartooning tips, and I saved this article on, if you're not already using a brush, this is why you need to, and it kind of gave a step-by-step tutorial on how to turn a page and use a brush to create good line weights. Do you feel like the use of a pen nib has a different control value than a brush?
Well, yeah, it's a lot less flexible. I mean, it gives you much more consistent line weight. Where brush is, requires a lot more practice and control.
So another thing that I run into with students is trying to teach them how to use a brush as well. And right now you're not using a brush, but one thing that I try to tell them is that when you're inking with a brush or any other type of tool, you can't attack the problem like you're writing a letter. There's a different way you hold and control the tool versus a number 2 pencil.
Right, and again, one of the things is you can't really discover any of that stuff until you actually just, you got to take the pen or the brush and start messing around with it. Just start, get a bunch of scrap paper and just start drawing and practicing and seeing, what kind of lines the pen or the brush makes, and then if you can make those lines consistently. I have a ton of scrap paper I found up in the attic last spring, an old box of stuff I had from a teenager, and there was just tons of sheets of loose paper in there where I was just literally just practicing, like inking, making lines, practicing my penmanship, as so to speak.
Right. So just like pianists would
exactly
do chopsticks all Saturday afternoon.
Or the martial artist does his katas.
Right.
It's the same exact idea. You have to practice. Or a musician, if you don't practice, you just never get any better. There are no shortcuts.
I've come across some youngsters who, after you break down all these rules, and there's a lot of stuff that we don't even see you do because it's all ingrained in you. Like, that's part of the magic trick of great cartoonists. It just seems like this stuff just appears on the page, and we've watched you draw and ink this whole strip. And one thing I've seen from students is that they get, well, at least in my opinion, they get discouraged with finding out there's so many rules to this. You know, it just seems so easy. Then what's the big deal? And then when they have problems drawing their own comics, they get frustrated, and a lot of them give up.
And your question is?
Why? Well, I don't know what makes it seem so easy. I mean, you have years and years and years of experience to make you be able to just knock this strip out.
I think what makes it appear, I'm sure for people watching this video, it just seems like, oh, it's magic. He just puts his line exactly where he wants the line to go.
Right.
And whatever. And, you know, part of that is true, but it's just through, you know, a million hours of practice. I think the fact is to be good at anything. I don't care whether it's, you know, being a cartoonist or a musician or mathematician or an athlete. You have to spend hours and hours and hours practicing. And if you really don't enjoy that process of practicing, you know, you don't get any fun out of that, then, you know, this is probably not what you're cut out for doing. You might just always be a person who's a fan of cartooning or likes art, but it's probably not going to be your vocation because it's not what you really enjoy doing. This is what I really enjoy doing.
So, as some people say, that it all begins with putting your butt in the chair.
And it never leaves until the job is done.
A friend of mine who isn't in the cartooning business asked me a question about what I was going to do when I retire, and I laughed at him, and I said, cartoonists don't retire, they drop dead.
Yeah. I mean, I can't ever honestly see myself retiring. What would I do? I guess I'd sit around and draw all the time. Well, that's kind of what I do. I mean, I could see, you know, maybe you get to a point where you don't do certain types of commercial assignments or something.
Sure.
And you know, spend your day doing landscapes or, I don't know, sculpting or, I don't know, whatever.
But there's no magical date where you're just going to go, yeah, you know, I've drawn enough cartoons, I'm done.
I cannot honestly imagine that. You know, I mean, I suppose anything is possible, but I can't imagine that I would get to a point where I would suddenly go, no, you know, I don't need to draw any more pictures.
Well, full up.